people saw around the corner, saw where things were going, saw the new opportunities that came from this. And I feel very, very similarly right now when it comes to AI in terms of how it's going to transform the world that our children are going to inherit. So I'm always very happy when I speak to a child and you discover that their interest in medicine stems from a genuine desire to help people, to be a healer. When you talk to them and you get the sense that that's where their heart is and so on, right? Because it's an incredibly noble profession and it's desperately needed. But when I get the sense that it's more that's where they think the money is, then I sort of have to steer them in a different direction. Because while doctors, alhamdulillah, do eventually do pretty well for themselves, it takes a very, very long time to get there and an insane amount of effort. How many doctors do we have other than doctors? Any other doctors here? They're all at the hospital. So it's just a very, very long path. So, if someone tells me they're interested in money, I certainly don't dissuade them, but there are a lot of much faster, easier ways to make money and more money than going into medicine. And then with engineering, I think it's also, for a certain type of kid who's like very, very sort of a spreadsheet type, mathematical, very, engineering oriented, it can be a great profession, right? Sometimes choosing a profession like that does simplify some future decisions. Graduating from Harvard with a degree in, Middle Eastern history, it wasn't that it closed doors. A lot of people thought, oh, you'll never make any money. That's not really true. I could have easily gone to Wall Street. I could have gone into consulting. I could have done, any number of different things. I did go into Islamic finance, but it opens up almost too many doors. So sometimes specializing early is good. Okay. ICI TV. Okay. Cool. Okay. So, okay. Does that sound okay? Yep, Bismillah. All right, I guess I can start again. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalam ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal mursaleen sayyidina wa nabiyyina wa mulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi sahbihi wa sallim. Hamzah, I know we've been talking informally, but this is more the actual presentation I had prepared. So let me just hit my own recording button. Okay. What's up? Okay, so where is the camera? It's there? Could I get someone to just advance the slides then? That'd be easier. Can be your honor. So, does that look okay? I need to be able to see too. All right, ready? All right, Bismillah. Okay, so today the topic I wanted to talk about, as it says, faith as your admissions ticket, how Islamic values shape college success. We were just talking about this a little bit informally, but this is really, I think not only can Islam be, the most important part of our background, but it can also be the thing which actually helps us achieve success within this college application process. Bismillah. So essentially the subtext, how practicing the deen can help us get into college. So that's sort of what I do. These are some of my students from a few years ago, and helping Muslim teenagers get into their dream colleges. That's sort of the promise of what I try to do. But more importantly, as it says in the subtext, helping them unlock success in this world and the next. So I always just like to start with, from Muhammad Faris, or actually this one's Peter Gould. Just we do a conscious Bismillah, so we just renew our intention, inshallah, for being here. Hi, Bismillah. So some facts about me. I think I mentioned some of these, but I'm what I have dubbed a Mayflower Muslim, which means that both on my mother's side and father's side, I have family that came over on the Mayflower, the first colonizers, I guess, if you want to call it that. But essentially, as far as like white Americans go, I'm about as American as they come. But alhamdulillah, Allah saw fit to give me hidayah when I was 15 years old, when I was in boarding school. And then I went on to study Arabic and Middle Eastern history and economics at Harvard. Alhamdulillah, the last 20 years or so, after a short career in Islamic finance, I transitioned to education and taught all over the world, and then eventually private school back in Massachusetts. And then for the last 10 years or so, I've been at an Islamic school, as I was mentioning before. Among many roles there, I've helped place hundreds of Muslims in many of the country's best colleges. I'm a writer. I have a Substack newsletter that I know few of you at least read. I try to publish it every Friday. And then I founded this company, again, to help Muslim teenagers get into their dream colleges and unlock success in this world and the next. So in terms of the specific challenges we face as a community, one of the big ones is that most families, actually I can do an informal poll. How many of you were born outside of the United States? How many were born inside the United States? All right, so it's a pretty small crowd, but we're looking at 100% from outside, alhamdulillah. So usually it's about 80-20 in terms of the people that come to me. 80% of the people were not born in the States, but of those 80%, the vast majority of their children, certainly their younger children, were born here in the States. So that's where we have somewhat of a disconnect, right? Where the families are usually professionals. They're successful professionally. They're well educated. They went to universities overseas in general, but they didn't go to school here. And they know that the American educational system is a little bit complicated. In a lot of countries, people like me don't have a job. We shouldn't have a job, right? Applying to college should be simple. If it were just a numbers game, and you just took the Thanawi Amma. Any Egyptians here? No Egyptians? MashaAllah. In Egypt, they take the Thanawi Amma, this big test that you take at the end of high school, and that determines your whole future. Here, they use this holistic admissions criteria, so it's a little bit more complicated. And there's not really a lot of content aimed at our particular demographic, at Muslim American audiences. Now, of course, we see what's happening. The front page news today, if you turn on the news, is about all these protests that are going on at these Ivy League campuses, Columbia and places like that. I have a Facebook page, which is somewhat public facing. So someone had put on there earlier today that I don't think what you're doing is useful anymore because we shouldn't send our kids to these kinds of schools until they divest from. And I understand that sentiment, and I don't. I think that's definitely a choice, and I think it's a reality that colleges need to think about. On the other hand, the fact that there are Muslim kids, and lots of non-Muslims as well, who are on those campuses and are taking a stand and are putting their professional lives at risk and so on, has landed them on the front page. And if we really want to have our children change the broken system that we have in this country, those of them who can succeed at those types of institutions, we should really consider sending them there. Right? You can have a huge impact. One of my good friends from my time at Harvard, he was later an ambassador. He's actually currently an ambassador, and he worked with the Obama administration. He's now in the Biden administration. And, obviously that brings up a lot of challenges, right? Especially these days, to work in the Biden administration and, Genocide Joe and all that kind of stuff. It's very, very difficult. But on the other hand, he has the ear of very powerful people and can try to shape those policies. And so essentially it's a difficult time for all of us and for our children, but we should be very proud of what those kids are doing on those campuses and support them. And obviously, as we were sort of saying, Islamophobia is rampant, and so a lot of people are afraid. College essay is one of the big parts of the college application process. And so for many Muslim students, it's very hard for them to write an essay where they don't talk about Islam in some way or another. It should be hard, right? If you're practicing Islam, it's so much part of the bedrock of your soul that it's hard for you to talk about yourself if you're writing a very personal essay without mentioning it in one way or another. But obviously there are ways to do that, and then there are ways not to do that, right? Some of the first drafts of some essays I've seen would have been very alienating if they'd gone out that way. They're not used to talking about themselves or their faith to a diverse audience, right? And other people are just scared to even mention anything, and they suppress all of that. So alhamdulillah, this is something that I try to help kids figure out how to navigate. So only a few of you were here earlier, so I'll go through this. So this is what I call the 5 before college framework. So when I was founding this company, I wanted to address two main issues. One was the lack of any sort of faith-based guidance in the college application process. It's just something I didn't see anywhere, right? But then the other one was I saw within our community a lack of sophistication around the process, and the primary thing was people starting way too late, right? Waiting until kids are juniors or seniors in high school is way, way too late to really begin thinking about this college application process. And when I looked back to my time at Al-Noor, I realized that the key to our success was that I had started working with those students 5 years before they actually applied to college. I used to teach them in 6th grade English, 9th and 10th grade English, and then I was their dual enrollment counselor and guidance college counselor in 11th and 12th grade. So for 5 years, I was teaching those kids. And I thought, 5 years, that's the time. If you start thinking in, strategically about college back when you're in 8th grade, then you have a chance, to really excel, right? Because 8th grade is where you're deciding where should I go to high school, right? The 8th grade grades don't get reported to colleges, but your 9th grade grades do. So if you have a good 8th grade, the chances of you hitting the ground running in 9th grade are great. The other reason, though, of course, is that there's the famous 5 before 5 hadith, right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, you can go to the next slide, take advantage of 5 before 5, right? And then, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given that, quality of jawami al-kalim, like he was able to pack so much meaning into just a few words. So he then broke it down what we should do. Take advantage of your youth before your old age, your health before your sickness, your wealth before your poverty, your free time before your busyness, and your life before your death. Right? Can we just go back to I just want to do one at a time for now. So youth before old age, right? So what I did was I took that hadith, which I've always thought about and given khutbahs about it, and it's always like stuck in. And when I started a Substack, when I started a newsletter, I decided to call it 5 before 5. And every week I share like 5 ideas about education, business, other things that are connected to sort of Western thinking and Islam, sort of a merger of the two. But so when I thought about the hadith, I realized it really gives us advice about how to excel as high school students, right? It gives us advice for all of us about how to excel, where we should be focusing our time, right? But specifically, you can sort of map it onto the high school experience. So the first one is youth before old age, right? When students are, at the age of being a student, your full-time job is to be a student, and the job of a student is to do well academically, right? And so, as much as a lot of what I tell students is to, make sure you're doing stuff beyond just academics, right? Academics are important but not sufficient, right? If you don't have the academics, then it's going to be very, very difficult to excel, at least in this college world. I would say, as an aside, that I don't think every student that I've ever worked with should go to college, right? I'd say 80% of the students I've been with are perfect college candidates. 20% either aren't ready for college yet, or it's just not an environment where they're going to find a lot of success, right? And for them, learning a trade, they're amazing with their hands. They could be an HVAC repair person or an electrician or some sort of practical career like that. They'll be making way more money very much sooner than a lot of their friends who go off to college, and they're going to just be very happy, right? Because it's actually doing something within their strength. But for most of our students, most Muslim kids come from fairly academic families and academic backgrounds, and college does make a lot of sense. So we need to take care of academics, and reading is the greatest predictor of success, right? Kids who read, and there aren't that many of them, sadly, right? There aren't that many adults who read, right? But when I find a kid who's a reader, who always has a book in their hand, right? I'm convinced that they're going to be all set. The next one is health before sickness. This is another area where I see when I was in school, sports were mandatory. I played football, basketball, and tennis, right? All 3 seasons. And it was incredibly important. I was a good but not fantastic athlete. Tennis was my best sport, but when I was at Harvard, James Blake, who was like the number 3 tennis player in the world, was the captain of the team, and I was not nearly at that level. But still, playing that sport then and continuing to play it now has given my life lots and lots of meaning. You can learn so much on the sports field. And that's a place where I'm so happy to see kids playing basketball over there and so on, because most Islamic schools do not have anything remotely like what you guys have here. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for that, but also increase and let our kids play team sports and it's a big part of American culture, but it's also a big part of sort of growing up. And then wellness is more in the mental health area. There's a big pandemic of mental health issues. Let's keep going. Wealth before poverty. This is another thing that I see. High school, you don't need to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your life. A lot of kids come to me all stressed out, or parents come to me all stressed out because their kids don't know what they want to do with their lives. I understand where the stress is coming from, but it's also, that's not a death sentence in this country. It is possible to apply to college undecided. At the same time, you have all this precious time in high school, especially in the summers, to really try to explore different ways of different possible career options through internships and other things like that. Also, paying for college is an incredibly important topic, and I think I have a slide on that later. But so for families, thinking about paying for college from the very beginning when the kids are very young is very important. Also, there's ways to cut down on the cost of college through by getting scholarships and other things like that. Keep going. And then free time before busyness. This is our extracurriculars, the things we do outside of school, and our suhbah, our friendships. Right? This has such an impact on kids. Right? You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if our kids get into the wrong crowd, or even if they're Muslims but they're not really uplifting them, or they don't have any real vision for their own lives, they're just sort of going through the motions of life, they're not going to be as ambitious and so on. And then finally, life before death. This is where I talk about character and our Islam, the most important things, right? Take advantage of your life before death. All right, let's keep going. So Hamzah, this formula of working with kids for 5 years and working on those sort of 5 topics is a formula that has been proven to work. Right, Hamzah, these are some of the schools. that my students have gone off to. And it's not just that they go to these schools. Like just last weekend, I was at a wedding of a student of mine. She went to MIT and then did her master's at MIT in her 5th year. And she was the president of the MSA for 2 or 3 of those years, right? So the president of the MIT MSA coming from like a small Islamic school. Almost all of the, the students where our Al-Noor kids go are almost always in the, MSA leadership team. So they're not just going to the campus. A lot of them are, these protests happening right now, those are led or at least, in part by kids like that, right? So, it's important. You can keep going. So these are just some of my students, what they said about me. Brother Hamzah not only helped me reach the Ivy League, but also helped me figure out who I was. He's at UPenn now. Hamzah's help was a godsend. He brought a wealth of knowledge to the table, knowledge that I, as a first-generation American Muslim, was not privy to. Amina, she's at Williams. She was at this wedding last weekend. She's actually studying over at Oxford right now. Williams has an amazing exchange program with them, and she's just loving it. The way he speaks makes me want to open up a book and absorb new ideas. I like that one as an English teacher. Brother Hamzah is the best teacher I've ever had. My family was very happy and proud of me because of him. And Brother Hamzah changed my life. He opened my eyes to the reality that life is more than just getting into a good college. I like that one too, just because, even though I talk about college a lot, I 1000% agree with Zainab there. This is just a book. If you have your phone, you're welcome to download it. This is 11 mistakes Muslim families make when applying to college. So I just wanted, after doing this for a while, the very first mistake is one we've already talked about, not starting too late, not starting early. And there are quite a few other ones there from my experience. Everyone got a chance to snap it if they want it? 1 second. All right, bismillah. So try to get through this. So topics: start with intention, find your why, excel academically by tapping into the power of barakah, stand out by standing up for the deen, and then a little behind the scenes of what actually happens, how admissions decisions are made at top colleges, and then finally some suggested resources and other things that are out there that I can help with. So obviously, the very first hadith and so many hadith collections and Imam Nawawi and so on, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Actions are according to their intentions. So the first thing is your intention. We can go to the next one. You have to begin with the end in mind. This is the reality. This is where we're going, right? There's a famous teacher or head of school at one of the fanciest schools in Boston. And on the first day of school, he would bring the parents of the seniors together, and he would always shock them, and he would say, I don't care where your sons go to college. It's an all-boys school. I don't care where your sons go to college. I don't care what they do for a living, right? He says, the only thing I care about is how they die, right? And he had the same idea that what is life if not a preparation for this moment, right? And so this is what we need to think about. This is what we're preparing our kids for. This is why they're in school. Of course, we never want to think about this in terms of our own children, but ultimately, this is where the real success lies. If we're successful and we're lowered into that grave, then we've been completely successful. And it doesn't matter about anything else. It doesn't matter what was in our bank account or anything like that, right? So when you start with that thought and you have that at the forefront of your mind when making academic and college decisions, that makes a huge difference. Next one. Right, so ask yourself, why do I want to go to college? Right? If we had students here, I could ask them, but inshallah, for the sake of this, if you ask most people, right, especially if they're not looking at the slide, then they'll say they want to go to college to, get a good job, right, to earn money. if you say, why do you want to go to like an Ivy League college, then it's about, oh, I want I want it's a prestigious place. There's a lot of honor there, right? It makes me feel good. Right? Those are all out there. There's nothing wrong with any of these things. They're not haram depending on how you go about them, right? But they're fairly low desires compared to those ones on the top, right? Spiritual contentment, seeking paradise, and then at the very top of the ridha Allah, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you reframe your college experience or your college application experience, rather than I'm seeking to go to the Ivy League, to I'm seeking the pleasure of Allah, potentially through the Ivy League, right? It totally changes the way you see the whole process and your intention of what you're trying to get when you're there and the intention of how you spend your time when you're there, right? So starting with the end in mind and beginning with the right intention is very important. Keep going. So I always tell my students, where you go to college is not who you'll be, which is not always the message that most college counselors tell people, right? In my business, you're supposed to like scare parents and work on their anxiety and tell them your kids are going to be failures if they don't do this. That's really not what I believe. I can't fake it, right? Where you go to college is not who you'll be. You can be very successful in this country no matter where you went to college or even if you didn't go to college, right? It doesn't determine that. That's not the only scoreboard, right? So what I see with a lot of people who care a lot about college is they put colleges on this pedestal, and the most common question I get as a college counselor is, will this look good for college? Right? That's what people come to me. They're asking about some extracurricular, this or that. Will this look good for college? And it's just the wrong answer, wrong question to be asking. If you're doing something to look good for college, then almost invariably it will end up not looking good to college. Because college admissions officers are very good at sniffing out things that are authentic and inauthentic. And if you're doing something just to put it on your resume, then it probably will backfire. It won't look very good for college, right? But if instead, right, so instead of, the metaphor I use is that when you make your goal to get into college, it's sort of like chasing your shadow, right? If you're in a playground and you watch a kid trying to chase their shadow, the shadow is always going to be one step in front of you, right? You can't catch your shadow. But there is a way to catch your shadow, right? Or the way to get your shadow, it's to turn away from your shadow and turn towards the light, towards the sun, and start walking, and then your shadow follows along obediently behind you, right? So when we take these kids and we help them turn away from aspiring for dunya, aspiring for college, aspiring for the bank balance, and instead turn towards the nur of Islam and go in that direction, then all those other things will come along behind you, right? When you bring your iman and your yaqeen on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His promises, and you make that your purpose, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up the floodgates for you. And those things will come to you without you even making that your intention. So there are so many ways to stand out without burning out, right? There's so many ways and things that students can do that will help them eternally. And one of the ideas is to focus on eulogy virtues versus resume virtues, right? So resume virtues are things you put on your resume, the tangible skills that you have, like you learned this computer science language, or you worked at Goldman Sachs, or things like that, right? Whereas eulogy virtues are the things they talk about at your funeral. They talk about your kindness, your empathy, your generosity, right? Those are the actual values that are the most important, not just in life, but even in the college admissions process. Once you get past that first level of sifting, which is usually based on numbers and academics, then they sort of put all the hard numbers aside and look at the soft things, look at these eulogy virtues. You can keep going. So this is an important concept, right? That learning needs to be more. I can't use the word Trump anymore. I need to remember to change the slide. Learning is more important than grades, right? So some kids are really good memorizers, but they're not great learners, right? mashallah, our kids memorize the Quran and they have these, mashallah, very, very prodigious memories. And that's a good thing, right, for them to memorize Quran. But some of them just over-rely on their memories in order to excel academically. And eventually, you hit a professor who actually insists upon critical thinking and the ability to not just regurgitate facts, but to be able to actually analyze those facts and put them in new orders, right? So the number one factor or quality colleges are looking for are intellectual curiosity. Unfortunately, school tends to drain people of their curiosity, right? Mark Twain famously said, I've never let schooling interfere with my education. If you go to a kindergarten classroom and you look at the way those kids look at the world, and they have their big, bright eyes, wide eyes, and they're just so interested in everything, and they ask why, right? Something happens along the line that drains that curiosity out of our children. And they lose that wide-eyed love and interest. I always tell people you need to become a kindergartner with a Harvard education. You need to go back and look at the world through those innocent eyes, ask those simple, basic questions, keep on asking why, right? But from this much more sophisticated place. Keep going. All right, so the second topic, excel academically by tapping into barakah. So this was sort of the main topic earlier today when I was speaking with the students. So I'll give a shortened version of it. But there are things that we can do within our tradition that actually most kids don't. So one of them, most basic, study in a state of wudu, right? How many people, like before they're taking an AP exam or before they're taking a math test, like go and refresh their wudu? I mean, maybe some do, maybe they do, but I don't think it was something that I was ever taught. Using Islamic means to, if you have a big test, are you going and praying 2 rakats beforehand? Are you making dua, right? Are you, our teacher Muhammad Faris, who I think is from the Dallas community, he was telling us about, he's written a few books, Productive Muslim Barakah Effect. He actually has his desk and he faces his desk towards the Qibla, right? Just to align his intention with what he's trying to do. Keep going. So one of the top things we can do is take advantage of those early mornings, right? Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam made dua for the early part of the day, right? And so this time, in the very early part of the day, tahajjud time, fajr time, right after fajr, before work starts, is amazing. Westerners have discovered this, right? There's the 5 a.m. club, right? And you'll see people and they'll be like, they're like evangelists for like waking up super, super early and so on. But the fact is that there is barakah in that time. You can get more done, between 5 and 7 a.m. than you can between, 8 and 3 p.m., right? There is just barakah in that time when you can lock in and get in the zone and get the most important things, especially the things that require deep thought and so on, done first thing in the day. But in order to do that, you need to have a good sleep schedule. Earlier today, I did a poll with the students, and a few of them go to sleep at 9, a few more go to 10, but most of them are 11, 12, 1, 2, right? If you're going to sleep at 2 in the morning, what time does school start here? 8 o'clock? So, and inshallah they're getting up for Fajr, right? So that's not enough time, right? I had to get up pretty early this morning, so I don't know. But in general, if I don't get at least 7 hours of sleep, I can feel that I'm just a shell of what I am capable of. Right? You need sleep. It's the best performance-enhancing drug. So when you figure out how to tap into this barakah and take advantage of things like studying in wudu and after Fajr, that lets you get those top grades. But the main thing about that is it lets you get better results in less time so that you actually have more time to do the stuff that really matters, right? To memorize Quran, to start your non-profit organization, to do things like that. Let's keep going. So I had talked about this earlier today. I had direct experience with this barakah, right? This expansion of time. Writing has always been something very difficult for me. It was always my biggest strength. I think it's why I was successful academically, but it was a very painful process. That which is written without effort is generally read without pleasure, right? So it always took me a lot of effort to write, right? But we're allergic to working hard, most of us. And so writing is a very, does anyone feel this? Does anyone find that writing is a difficult thing, right? So I knew that I needed to write. I knew that that was like when I would make dua or something like that, pretty much it was like very clear like what you are not doing right now, the reason you're not reaching your potential is you're not writing. So one day I was in class, I was teaching the college essay, which I've done for so many years, and the student challenged me. He said, Brother Hamzah, you always say show, don't tell, but then you just tell us how to write essays. You've never shown us how to write a college essay, right? So he's like challenging me, like, gauntlet thrown. So then I said, okay, I'm going to write a college essay. So I went home and I prayed Fajr at the Masjid. I went home. I had 45 minutes till I had to be back at school. And, I just sat down. I wrote a college essay for the first time in 25 years. And it was about doing the New York Times crossword puzzle. So I love language, I'm an English teacher and so on. So you'd think that the New York Times crossword puzzle would be one of my favorite things in the world. So many people find it. But I had this epiphany that I never have liked it because I always tried to do it in ink, right? I'd try to answer the New York Times crossword puzzle in ink, meaning that if I got something wrong, then I'd have to cross it out and there was no, and it would get all messy. And so I didn't like getting things wrong, so I just didn't do it. I just avoided it. And then I discovered that there's this thing called a pencil, right? Where you can pencil something in, right? And then if you get it wrong, you can erase that and then guess something else. So it's this whole idea, essentially using a metaphor to talk about one of my biggest things that held me back, which was this fixed mindset, right? That you're either good at something or you're not good at something, right? That I was obsessed with getting things right, so it prevented me from trying out new things, trying to do things, pushing myself out of my comfort zone, and so on. And so essentially I used that as the metaphor, and I found it to be so enriching to actually write and think about who I am as a person that I made this a deal that I was going to write 30 college essays in 30 days. And so then, alhamdulillah, through the magic of barakah and that post-Fajr time, I was able to write 30 college essays in 30 days. I forget where I put my bag, but I have a couple of copies here that I can give away afterwards. Yeah, it's there, inshallah. Okay, bismillah, we can keep going. So, as I was saying before, thank you. Here are the books, inshallah. So whoever is interested, we can fight for them afterwards. Iqra, right? This is the very first command in the Quran, very first word of the Quran. Read, right? Obviously, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to the Prophet ﷺ in very different contexts, but still, reading is so critically important. So one of the best things I tell parents is to give your kids an unlimited book budget. You can keep them on a budget for everything, but for books, tell them there's no limit. Well, within reason, right? So this guy said, we pay my oldest $1 every time he reads a book. We're talking about 160-page chapter books. I'm out $120 this year, and he thinks he's ripping me off. Best investment ever, right? So, this can be a really good thing. So these are just a few books that I've either taught in my classes or have been very personally helpful for me. Think and Grow Rich, an amazing old school book by Napoleon Hill, which is essentially telling you that in order to make something of your life, it's all between the ears. It's just inside your mind. It's just about having that vision and so on. Productive Muslim, I mentioned before, Muhammad Faris, your community member. Very, very helpful book that helped me learn to use a lot of the Islamic tools to become more personally productive. Magic of Thinking Big is similar to Think and Grow Rich. Again, this idea of getting so many CEOs and other ultra successful people have this book like right on their bookshelf, right behind their desk. Because this book that they read when they were teenagers ended up like giving them a vision of what was possible, right? Like, where does Elon Musk come up with the idea of, SpaceX or Tesla? I mean, we might have our own issues with Elon Musk and politics and everything, but you can't deny that he's had a pretty big impact on this world. And he didn't do it by thinking small, he was thinking big, right? How to Be a High School Superstar is a fantastic book by Cal Newport, which really, it teaches you how to be what he calls a relaxed superstar, a kid who just stands out, gets into great, great colleges without burning themselves out. And a lot of very practical advice and so on. And then Mindset is a famous book by Carol Dweck. I'm sure you guys probably, the educators, know that one. That was really where I first started learning about growth mindset and fixed mindset and so on, and just realizing just how much our mindset controls everything. Keep going. All right, so these are some specific time management things. This slide was on the presentation earlier today. So one thing that we can do as adults, and we can teach our children, is to eat the frog, right? So what eat the frog means is we all have some sort of a task that we're dreading, that we really don't want to do, right? Every day when we get to work, there's probably something that we know is the most important thing we want to do, but because of that, and because it most likely takes the most mental firepower, we just put it off. Right? And we say, okay, I'm going to do all the other stuff. We fill ourselves with the busy stuff. We're replying to emails, and we're doing all the relatively easy, low leverage things. Right? Eat the frog is you tackle that very hardest thing first. That's where you use that barakah of the early morning, to eat the frog. Right? And so kids with their homework or whatever it is, right, tackle the top priority thing first. Right? And then everything else will become easier. And even if you don't get to anything else, you knocked the most important thing. If you did this every single day, imagine where you'd be a year from now if you kept day after day tackling the most important thing on your list. Right? And then the Pomodoro technique is more of a time management technique. Right? It's working in short intervals, 25 minutes. The Pomodoro is a type of timer, like a kitchen timer. But essentially you set a timer for 25 minutes, and then during those 25 minutes you work on just one task at a time. Right? So you're single tasking. Right now people try to multitask, right? And multitasking, I don't know, there's a doctor here, but from what I understand, multitasking is pretty much a myth. Like it's not something that people can do. Maybe women can do it better than men, Allahu alam. They certainly try, but if you set a timer for 25 minutes so you know it's not an interminable amount of time, and then you just sit down and focus on just one task for that period of time, then you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish. I was doing this seminar for students, and it was a webinar, so their parents were there. And so one of them, we met a day or two later, and she's like, I'm a lawyer, and I've been using the Pomodoro method at work, and I've gotten more work done in the last few days than I had in the previous months. So these are things that are not just for kids; they're for us as well. Keep going. And then this is an important one, right? When kids are feeling anxious, it's usually because they think that they're in control, right? They think that they're the ones and it's their decisions, right? We have to stop relying on ourselves and recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one in control. So you do your best, and you do need to do your best, and you need to have ihsan about what you do, but then you surrender the rest, right? So it's not about, and the same thing with applying to college, right? As much as I might talk about Ivy Leagues and this and that, we don't have control over what happens in an admissions office, right? I never would promise someone that you'll get into this school or that school, right? It's unethical. You're not even allowed to do that if you're a college consultant following those rules, right? So it's more like planting the seed, right? Like this gardener mindset, right? أَفَرَأَيْتُمْ مَا تَحْرُثُونَ أَأَنْتُمْ تَزْرَعُونَهُ أَمْ نَحْنُ زَارِعُونَ. Right? We should see our children as seeds, right? They're seeds that we're planting, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is causing them to grow. And the amazing thing about seeds, if you look at the seed, trees are always growing in two directions at one time. Right? They're growing down and they're growing up. Right? There's the root system, and then there's the fruit system. And the way a seed works is the roots have to go down first. Right? When you plant a seed, we don't see anything happening, but if you look, if you're in science class and you can look, the roots are going down. And when you're going down, there's actually, it's difficult, right? It's dark, it's damp, it's moist, and there's pressure, right? Because it has to break through the soil and so on, right? And only once those roots are deep enough into the soil can the fruit system come out, can the sprout come out. Right? And so it's the same thing with our children, right? That a lot of times we try to make things so easy for them, and we never give them any hardship, and they're never in that dark period, where they're trying to actually put down their roots. And as a result, when they get out into the real world, right, the winds of the dunya come and that blow them over, right? The kids who grew up, most of the students who I see who are the most strong have gone through some sort of really significant hardship. I had a student with leukemia who almost died when he was younger. He had to travel to the United States to get a life-saving operation. He was just on a totally different level, emotionally, spiritually, in so many ways because of this hardship that he'd gone through, right? But we do everything in our power to raise our kids in these antiseptic greenhouses and bubbles and so on, and never let them have any experience of possibly failing. We never want to let them out of our sight, right? But the reality is the kids need to grow those roots, right, so that the fruits that ultimately come from it are much sweeter. All right, let's keep going. All right, so stand out by standing up for the deen. Right, so obviously, if you see this, sea of umbrellas, there's only one umbrella that most people are going to notice, right? The red umbrella. So it's the same idea. Keep going. Right, this is also something I showed to the students earlier. So the way I became Muslim, I was at a boarding school, and it was outside of Boston. So it was parents' weekend of my freshman year. My parents lived close by, so they'd come during the morning and then they left. So I was feeling really sorry for myself. I was all alone. Everyone's parents were there and so on. And I was walking through the hallway and I smelled this delicious smell of Indian food. And so I loved food, still do, as Dr. Layla has discovered by feeding me all day today. I started following my nose down the hallway until the smell got really strong outside this one particular door, right? And then sort of accidentally on purpose, I sort of fell into the room. And I saw this brother Nabil sitting with his cousin, sitting on the floor, and they had this goat curry on a big plate they were eating with their hands, and they were drinking masala chai, right? And so they saw me staring at their food, so they're Muslim, of course, they're very generous. They say, Bismillah, tfaddal, right? And so we start eating it, and even more than the curry, I'd never had masala chai. This was before it was like a flavor at what the company formerly known as Starbucks. So when I was drinking the chai, I was amazed. So he gave me my first Muslim name. My first Muslim name was Mahbub Chaiwala. So if the Desis in the room usually get a kick out of that. So Chaiwala is like a tea boy, like the guy who, when I went to India later, and they love tea so much that the tea sellers wear it as like a backpack, and they go chai, 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 garamande, right? And like, so the train pulls into the station, and then you're like chai, and then he comes and he has the backpack and he pours it like this. So anyway, that's what I was named, Mahbub, beloved tea boy. And that was my Muslim name for a long time. The other thing about Nabil was, we'd be getting ready to brush our teeth and so on, and he'd be doing all this weird stuff in the bathroom with water and putting it down his arms and things like that. And then he'd put his feet in the sink, and we're like, what is going on? He used to have a miswak, and we're like, what are you doing? We'd be brushing his teeth, and he'd be like miswaking. And like, what's going on? He'd carry a lota everywhere he went, but essentially by practicing the sunnah, by practicing Islam, He'd go back to his room, he'd call the adhan out loud, right? There were no other Muslims there, but he was just practicing Islam openly, right? With this niyyah of da'wah. Right? And as a result, alhamdulillah, 3 of us ended up embracing Islam. 3 of us ended up seeing what he was doing, wanting to know more about it, asking him questions, and eventually, alhamdulillah, we became Muslim. Keep going. So that's another story I like to tell people when they're very reluctant to think about sending their kids away from home. Like if Nabil's parents had not sent him there and had kept him there, I mean, of course, Allah can guide however he wishes, but it was very important to me that alhamdulillah, came across a practicing Muslim when I was 14 years old, in that kind of environment. My father had gone to that school, my grandfather had gone to that school. It's called St. Mark's. It's an Episcopal school. It's not the place where you'd think that you'd find Islam, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can work His ways. So in terms of this whole college thing, there's this concept, that competition is for losers. Like people who just try to compete with other things on they try to like you can't really compete with someone on the SATs because someone's going to have a 1600 on the SAT. Even if you have a perfect 1600 on the SAT, right? It's not going to really help you stand out. These Ivy schools love to brag every year about how many people with perfect SAT scores they rejected from the school. It's like a badge of honor for them. So, you can't really compete with people, on the things that everyone's doing. Right? So you have to, you stand out by becoming this category of one, right? There's an element of marketing, personal branding, whatever you want to call it, to this whole college application process. Keep going. What time do we have to? 8:12. 8? Okay. Okay, so this is just, I think when parents think about why they're reluctant to send their kids, they have very good reason to be. And these statistics, which are actually a few years old and could be even worse by this point, are indicative of that. That's where, Islamic schools are so important, right? That's why you need to have that Islamic foundation, before you go into this difficult environment. Where in order to maintain your iman, but if you're able to go to that type of environment where shaitan has so many arrows, right, and maintain your deen, then you can change that environment. Keep going. Hi. So this is about understanding what happens behind the scenes. So this is really relevant for the highly rejective schools, or they usually call them selective schools. I like to call them rejective schools. The schools with the 10% or lower acceptance rates. For other schools, it's a much simpler process, right? It's, it's not as complicated as this. But for those top schools that many people are going for, this is sort of how the process works. Okay, so I would have done this as an exercise, but we don't really have enough time to do it. But one of the key things I always try to tell my students is they need to be able to reduce themselves to just a 2-word summary of who they are. Right, so I had a student earlier this year. Her 2 things were that she loved classics, Latin and Greek, right? And she also was really into computer science. So she's the classical coder. And then once you have that, then you need to be able to write your memoir, what you're all about, in 7 words, or 7-ish words. Right? So ancient texts guide new algorithms into existence. So her whole college essay was about, what Caesar and Cicero taught me about algorithms, right? Like it's an interesting topic, right? It's not something you read about every day. It's not something you've thought about. The quarterback poet, you can imagine, he throws touchdowns by day, drops bars by night, right? That's going to stand out. The historian gamer, the Hafiz mathematician, find divine rhythm in numbers and verses, the beekeeper biologist, right? So when you're able to, come up with these adjectives, come up with these descriptors for yourself, that's what colleges are essentially doing. They're looking at your whole college application and trying to boil you down to something really easy and memorable, right? So you can steer that process by figuring out what you are, how you want to be perceived. Keep going. So this is about how colleges make decisions. One of the biggest factors that I didn't understand until I got into this was something called institutional priorities. Right? I used to think that colleges were making decisions on individuals. The reality is colleges are trying to create whole classes, right? And so they need, people always say, should I be well-rounded? Is that what colleges are looking for? Someone who's sort of a jack of all trades? Or should you be pointy? Should you specialize in one thing? And the answer is pretty resoundingly, pointy is better, right? You should find one or two things that you really go deep in, and so where you actually excel, you're impressive in those areas, because colleges are looking for a well-rounded class as a whole of pointy individuals who are strong in all these different areas. But the reality is some years you're a striker in soccer, and their goalie just graduated. They already have a striker, right? So you're not going to get into that school not because of your SAT or your grades or anything else, but just because they didn't happen to need you. But another school, they have plenty of goalies, but they need the striker, and you end up getting there. So you never really know what's going on. This is why admissions at the top schools are so unpredictable, and why you shouldn't take these things personally, why you do your best and surrender the rest. There's a lot of advantages in strategy in terms of applying early action, early decision. This is one of the big decisions that students have to make. Just keep going. These are just strategies for saving for college, but I think we're a little short on time, so I want to just make sure to get to the very end of the thing. So keep going. Yep, this is a great college essay, but we're not going to read it. You can leave this for a second, the QR code one. So this is another download if anyone's interested. So I was mentioning before, people want to write about Islam on their college essay. These are 5 students that I've worked with that wrote essays that somehow connected to Islam. One of them wrote about memorizing the Quran in South Africa, at a madrasa in South Africa, at the same time as he was reading the Harry Potter series, and making all these parallels between Hogwarts and the madrasa and the American education system and the South African system. It was a brilliant essay. Hamzah, he got into Harvard and Yale and all sorts of other great schools. He now has actually 5 Harvard degrees. He's a pretty amazing kid. Let's keep going. So in terms of recommended resources, a few things, and I can share these slides. I think, Dr. Leila, you can send them out to people. But Muslim Campus Life is a really great website one of my friends runs. He publishes something called the Muslim College Guide with a lot of advice about how to evaluate colleges from a Muslim perspective. In terms of paying for college, Islamic Scholarship Fund has some great scholarships aimed at Muslims. A continuous charity is an interest-free loans. Essentially, they collect sadaqah money and they use it to pay off people's loans, and then it keeps on getting paid forward to the next generation and growing like that. And then Definance is another company that's trying to solve the riba situation differently. They actually sort of invest in really promising students and pay their tuition in exchange for an income sharing agreement that after the student graduates, they share a portion of their income with the company. And so it's something that you can actually invest in, so you can invest in the youth and get a return on your investment, but also the youth can get some of their college fees. Unfortunately, these are all very small programs compared to the need that's out there in the community. And saving for college, is critically important, and there are a lot of ways to automate it. If anyone wants to talk about that, you can talk later. Keep going. I have a lot of resources through my 5 Before College. There's a WhatsApp group. I can help you get into it. I didn't want to put like 7 QR codes, but I have an email list that I send out emails every Monday and Thursday with just tips and ideas and thoughts around teenagers, Islam, college. I have that newsletter that I mentioned before, the 5 Before 5 newsletter. And then I do a lot of webinars. Actually, speaking in person is a real treat. I usually do most of the stuff I do behind a Zoom screen. But that is good because it's easy to speak to lots of people at once. Keep going. And then in terms of like my actual company, what I do, it's essentially college and life coaching for Muslim teens. The goal is to achieve success in this world and the next, prepare for the Akhirah and the Ivy League, right? Tap into that barakah of starting early, those 5 years before college. But other benefits, you're joining a community of amazing Muslim teenagers. That's essentially what I'm trying to do, is build a community of Muslim students who are striving to be the best they can be in this world and the next. And being around other people who are striving like that can be very helpful. Built a team of mentors, Muslim mentors who can help people. And then obviously a college essay experience. Keep going. We're almost done. These are just some texts I got in the recent cycle from some of my students. Salam, Brother Hamzah, I got a full ride to the University of Notre Dame through Questbridge. Thank you for all your assistance. With Allah's blessing and the support and guidance of people like you, Zoya has been accepted into UPenn. Alhamdulillah. My sister-in-law Hikmat saw you for a free 1-hour college essay consultation. I actually looked it up. It wasn't free, but I'm glad she remembers it as free. It helped her immensely because she was able to gain clarity after months of agonizing over what to do. Her anxiety was through the roof. I tried to support her, but was also lost. Alhamdulillah, she's received acceptances from UT Austin, Tufts, Northwestern, and Columbia. And we're grateful to 5 Before College. So alhamdulillah, these are all very, they make you feel good. The two main sort of avenues of working with me, you can work one-on-one, but I prefer these group programs. So there's Find Your Qibla, and then the Ihsan Admissions Intensive. Can you go to the next slide? So Find Your Qibla, that's for the younger students in the first half of high school or late in middle school. The 3 goals of that are find your Qibla, like you have to find your Akhirah Qibla, like in other words, you need to find your real Qibla that you're bring that yaqeen and the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that success is only in the deen and that sort of thing. But also figure out what your sort of dunyawi North Star is, your dunyawi Qibla, right? The GPS coordinates that you're trying to get to. If you don't have a vision of where you're trying to go, you're never really going to get there. Right? And, sorry, go back. And once they've done that work, the foundational work of figuring out their akhirah vision, figuring out their dunya vision, then you work backwards to try to put in place something I call a Saturday morning project. So this is sort of like a passion project, side hustle. We talk about our 9 to 5, right? This is the 5 to 9, right? That other extra thing that you're doing, the thing that you're exploring. So for kids too, right? One of the few times they're free is weekend mornings. So this is a project they're so excited about that a kid is willing to wake up early in the morning to get going. Could be, starting a podcast or a YouTube channel or small business or something like that, but something that's very unique to them, that they are a category of one as they're applying and so on. And inshallah, the goal is obviously to gain the acceptance to the college of your dreams, but more importantly, build a life that leads straight to Jannatul Firdaus. And then for the rising seniors, that's when it's more the practical side of things, right? How to actually craft amazing applications. So say goodbye to application stress before senior year even starts, right? So this is something that happens over in July and August. It's a program where I'm teaching some of the classes, but I've also recruited really talented Muslim mentors who can help the students with their college essays, with their applications. We make them apply strategically, figure out the good college list, those kinds of decisions. And essentially, the goal is to meet your college deadlines way before your peers do. Just like people start thinking about college early, they also start applying to college too late in general, right? They start applying to college in late October for a November deadline, or like December 30th for a January 1st deadline. And so this helps, inshallah, kids are done with their application before they go back to school. And I think that's just about it. Can you go to? Yeah, if anyone's interested in meeting with me and wants to do a free session, that's usually the first sort of front door. So I like to just meet people, figure out who they are, what they're looking for. Every kid is different, and they try to have different services. And sometimes it's just one meeting like that, and sometimes things go in different directions. Anything else? I think that's it. Yep, that's pretty much it. That's my WhatsApp number, if anyone is interested. I also have business cards with me, and I need to give these books away. So, bismillah. You'd like one? Yeah. Sorry. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Thank you so much. I guess it's time for Maghrib, so. Inshallah. Not sure.